Apex Interstellar Transport.
If you're looking to get some use out of your gun, I have an opportunity.
I've got quality weapons for discerning customers. I've got the best stock in the system.
Oh, clever. Oh, I've got the money, so.
It's always good to have the space for an extra weapon. The Dominator gives you that, plus battle-ready armor and shielding. Good choice. Good choice. There's a reason they call that thing the Tormentor. Let's see what you got. Sure. Is that everything?
Let's see.
Anyone without at least a couple of those is asking for trouble. Always pays to keep a few of these on hand. You don't want to be anywhere near that when it goes off. Not without a shield. That'll give anyone with a shield a headache. Come back anytime.
Let's see.
How do you feel about that?
If you're not afraid of a little heat, I've got a job that needs to.
Oh, the market is really overperforming.
If you want to make a difference around here, I've got some courier work. Get this job done and you'll make some people very happy.
Contact by free to sell pretty diverse free services to sell. Good news.
Let me give you some more details. What are you after, danger money? What price did you have in mind? If that's what it costs to get this done, so be it. Good luck, Commander. It's not just me counting on you.
Gotta be prepared for anything
might encounter.
The Sirius Corporation, powering the galaxy.
Let's see.
The stress is just too much.
This job just doesn't leave me any time for myself.
Shouldn't you be doing that job we discussed?
Hey, you any good at getting into places you aren't meant to be?
So wherever you go,
Have you got more ammo than Morrell?
developed by Core Dynamics exclusively for members of the Federal Navy Auxiliary. The Federal Corvette is quite simply one of the heaviest hitters on the market. With a total of 7 hardpoints, to get behind the controls of a Corvette is to experience true power. So what are you waiting for?
Actually want to take the ship. Dude, I won't. No reason, of course. So anyway, Captain's log second 2021. Essentially, the big excitement. My life. I don't know which one's which. I don't know which one was which there either. I guess I'm just gonna have to jump there to get time. Oh no, I'm gonna go here first to get a different ship, I think. Am I? No, there's... What ship did I leave there? There we go. Huh. Oh, that.
retracted. Ship released. Engines engaged. Frameshift drive charging. 4, 3, 2, 1. Engage.
Just hope that there's a suspicion that is making this not too bad. Fixed relatively cheap. That's the scary part because tires are only $60. Also, it's not electric brake. Of course, that's connected to being inexpensive. It would be nice if it was something that was not only inexpensive, but maybe they could get it fixed the same day. They're bringing in. That would be nice. What are the chances of that ever happening? Everybody was having hopes for that. Better if it was
detected. with the boys, but turned into a power-hungry prick a couple weeks later when he became an agent. Brett said it was like a prisoner who became a guard. So my question is, do you have any experiences with George the Animal Steel, and do you agree with Bret Hart? And if so, why? And if not, why?
Well, I do have experience with George Steele, and I've worked with George Steele as an agent in the 90s. I guess, what was it? Would it have been 86 or 87 that Steele quit wrestling, had his last run, and became an agent? 88? Okay. So that was 5 years before I ever met him. All I can say is I never saw George Steele snort any cocaine. I found him to be intelligent, well-spoken. He was fun to ride in the car with. He was, fun to sit and talk and have a conversation with. He had a good understanding of the wrestling business. He knew that he had been a gimmick. He wasn't, the Luthez or the Bret Hart style of wrestler, but he was a gimmick, but he had respect for the gimmick. And, I'd never had an issue with him at all, and he wasn't the main event agent at that point in time. Pat Patterson would generally do that. Maybe Jack Lanza, if Pat wasn't around at a house show, would probably be doing the Shawn Michaels match or the title match or whatever. But George was important, both as an agent for the matches, and also back then the agents also did checkup work at the box office. And him and Hebner a lot of times would do that.
Which agent had the most heat when you were there?
Oh, God, well, heat, different kinds of heat. Strongbow was an eye roller. It was like Strongbow, because everybody knew that Jay Strongbow was going to be over in the corner asleep somewhere, except if he was woken up and actually physically told to do a specific thing. And he was going to be over in the corner otherwise if he was awake, telling his stories about how, he was great and everybody else doesn't know what they're talking about. Everybody kind of rolled their eyes at him, but nobody hated him. And he really just dealt with underneath matches and or the job guys or whatever, and then he was gone at some point. Tony Garea was a nice guy in some ways, but he was hard. He was very office and very official, and he would give the guys a hard time. If you weren't supposed to get a draw and you asked him for a draw, instead of saying, I wish I could, and I didn't ever get draws, so I'm not saying it's not a personal anecdote, but I've seen it. He'd say, well, we're not supposed to give draws. We can't give draws. Instead of saying, whatever. He was very, we wanted the job guys paid. Well, I don't have them on this list. Well, they're fucking standing here in front of you, Tony. And they just took the bump or did whatever. It was just, but again, people didn't hate him and want to get him fired. They're just like, fuck, I'd rather deal with fucking Hebner or Jack Lanza than Tony. I never had heat or vice versa with any of the agents because I thought they did a good job. I know that guys, depending on what their experience had been or, who was in charge of a match that they particularly didn't like, or whatever, or being on the road with guys on a regular basis, you get sideways with people, but I'm sorry Bret Hart didn't like George Steele. I thought he was a nice man. I felt bad. He had health issues for quite a while there, and I'll go ahead and say this because, fuck, I don't think it's a secret, but he had an operation and had a colostomy bag for some period of time, a few years. And then, out of nowhere, I was already in Louisville and working in OVW, and I talked to Bill Watts, and that's when Watts was on the kick where he was selling the vitamins and the supplements and the all-natural nutrition and stuff. Yeah, and he was...
Gummy bears, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, he was making a fortune on it, too, because you can't just... I bought some, never took the shit, but you can't tell Bill Watts, no, I'm not buying what you're selling. That's just not possible in English. But I mentioned George Steele's problem to him, and he hadn't talked to George in ages, and he reached out to him 6 months later, whatever it was. If I'm lying, I'm flying, my feet ain't left the ground. George Steele called me and said, I just want to thank you. I said, well, what? He said, I talked to Bill Watts and I said, what the hell? I've tried everything else. And he started taking Watts' stuff and he had that colostomy reversed. And he said, if it hadn't been for you just mentioning my name on the phone with him, I got my life back. And that was cool. But he took the time out to call and say that when it could have just stopped with Watts, because all I did was say, hey, you ought to call George Steele. But anyway, I like George, never had a problem.
I remember Dennis did a show once, Dennis Carluzzo in North Jersey. I think it was a hotel in Totowa, New Jersey, mixed in with a convention. And that was the day the ring disappeared. And they had to get Frank Idavia's ring. And then Frank and his guys had to get it up in the elevator, and then it broke in the first match. Derek Domino took a bump right where the hole was and hurt his back. So he comes into the back. First thing he fucking says to the first person he sees, which is George the Animal Steele, he goes, oh man, don't take a bump in that ring. And George Steele goes, son, I haven't taken a bump in 20 years. That was a fucking highlight, something I got to witness. But
and George is smart because he was a school teacher. That's the whole gimmick when he started wrestling in Detroit for the Sheik and what the 60s. He was the masked student because he was a school teacher and he was moonlighting. And then when he got the runs in the WWF for Vince Sr., he would do that in the summertime. He'd take 3 months off the school year and he'd go be George the Animal Steele in the WWF, work with Pedro Morales, whatever. And finally, it got to be where he was figured in enough with Vince and the business had changed to where he just said, fuck it, and quit teaching because he was, able to make so much money wrestling.
Well, Jim, perhaps if Bret Hart really had this big a problem, he should have looked into suing.
I'll tell you what, I think he should have, because after all, you got to put your money where your mouth is, or you got to put your lawyer where your mouth is. In this case, I know of a person he should have retained and sued George Steele until he was back in a cage somewhere as an animal chewing on human bones.
Call Stephen P. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two.
Yes, folks, if you have a former school teacher that you would like to sue until they are a raving animal eating turnbuckles with a green tongue, look no further than newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. That is indeed the number of the legendary, infamous Stephen P. New, the man, the consigliere of the cult of Cornette, the man who is taking the task upon himself to oversee the legal rights and privileges of the entire cult of Cornette. Folks, if you have a legitimate gripe against somebody, then Stephen P. New can take that person to court and get you the compensation that you so rightfully deserve. Whether you have been the victim of malfeasance, greed, and avarice by any major corporation that has poisoned you, prodded you, penetrated you, or in other ways made you sorry that you were around, now you can make them sorry. Make them get down on their hands and knees and apologize by calling newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084, laying your case out, and let Stephen P. New, the legal beagle, the king of torts, the barrister of champions, let him take it to the next level. Ryan, how many people have you sued just in the last 3 months?
6,
7, 8. I knew it was somewhere around there. Because Stephen P. New, he ought to have been born triplets. The man has such energy. He and Tony Khan, neither one ever sleep. Except Stephen does good work when he's away. Our longest running and most beloved sponsor here on the program. He's become an international celebrity, not only through his legal work, but also through the cult of Cornette, spreading his name far and wide. There are people in the jungles of Zanzibar riding those that have heard of Stephen P. New and New Lofts.
That's right. And what an ending that was there.
Yes, it was an abrupt stop.
Jim, let's get a couple more questions before we get a song or two and wrap things up. This one was sent to ponydragthrough@gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi.
Oh, it took this long.
Jonathan Coachman recently said Vince McMahon didn't like the fact that he was bigger than him. He said Vince didn't like the backstage interviewers to be bigger guys because it made the talent look smaller. Was this one of Vince's pet peeves when you were with the company?
Well, no, he's just said two different things there. He said Vince McMahon didn't like it because I was bigger than him. Vince McMahon didn't like it when the backstage interviewer was bigger than the talent. And those are two different things. And I can tell you, yes, Vince was the same way when I was there, and so is pretty much almost every promoter that I've ever worked for, with, or been around. Is no, you don't want your interviewer to be bigger than your talent. And I mean, maybe when Jules Strongbow was the matchmaker in Los Angeles, 6'6" and 350 pounds or whatever, he's standing there next to Nick Bockwinkel. Well, you couldn't do that much about that. He was the booker. But under normal circumstances, no, you don't want the interviewers, the announcers, the on-camera talent in that respect to be bigger than the wrestlers, unless it's, you know, it's a guy and it's the girl wrestler, then that's somewhat natural. But as far as, I don't think, I mean, is Coachman trying to flatter himself by saying that he had a better physique than Vince McMahon? Because I think
that's not the way I read it. I think it was just size, just overall bulk.
Well, is he even bigger than Vince? Coachman.
I don't know.
He does. I mean, he may be tall. He came in after I left. I may have met him one time in all these years. He may be taller, but he ain't jacked up like Vince was. I don't think Vince would sweat Jonathan Coachman. Been on the cover of Muscle and Fitness at 72 years old or whatever. I think Vince would have a hard time being in the business he's in if he didn't want people bigger than him around him. But for a business reason, I understand and feel the same way, which is another reason why that's another triple whammy on Alex Marvez. He's not only the worst interviewer in the history of television, he's bigger than everybody on the fucking roster. And you don't, that looks stupid.
Smoky Mountain, who did you have? Brian Matthews?
Brian Matthews.
That big ass head?
Well, yeah, I mean, Brian's head was larger than anybody. Well, no, we had several people do it over a period of time. Phil Rainey, the program director at Fox 43, was the first one because he had been Les Thatcher's partner in Southeastern Wrestling, and the fans in the area knew him. And, you know, he didn't do a real good job, but people knew him. But he could only do it in Knoxville. He wasn't going to travel to other cities. One time we got him to come to Johnson City because that's where we were shooting interviews. He came in, he's like, whoa, what a trip. So, okay. And we found Brian Matthews because his real line of work was for years he was a funeral director, a mortician. But he was on the radio on a very small station in Western Virginia. And he had a good voice. He had a large head, but he wasn't ridiculously tall. He was the same height as most of the guys, or if not shorter. He's my height. And he was a portly fellow, but he didn't look like he was any physical threat. And then we had Chip Kessler, who was a radio personality from the Tri-Cities. He was based out of Johnson City for years and years, and he was older and skinnier, and he was just a regular guy, and he did probably the best job of all of them on local promos. So, you know, yes, I wouldn't have had a guy that was ridiculously larger and as young or jacked up or built doing backstage interviews, because that would just, the visual would be jarring.
Were there any interviewers or announcers while you were there that Vince really hated? Because I mean, so many people came and went while you were there. Were there any that really ticked off Vince?
Oh God, I'm trying to, not the ones you would have thought. They loved to get the DJs involved, like Todd Pettingill and Sean Mooney, and they loved to, Vince loved people who looked like they would be newscasters or people on other television programs, even if they didn't know jack shit about the wrestling business. Which is why that Michael Cole always got picked over Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly was an experienced wrestling announcer. He'd been a wrestling fan most of his life. He'd done local television in Florida. He comes in and immediately he's a great wrestling announcer, but he's portly and didn't have a lot of hair. And Michael Cole comes in, has never he's called a dog more recently than he's called a wrestling match. And they had to bring him from scratch, but because he had a legitimate news background and had been I'm not knocking Michael Cole here. I never had a problem with Michael. I liked him, but he was not, especially at the start, nearly as good an announcer as Kevin Kelly was, but he had real television in his background, so Kevin Dunn chose him over Kevin Kelly for all the good assignments because he thought that he looked the part more of an announcer, but plus he didn't have to deal with Kevin being a wrestling fan and having wrestling background. They legitimately, even in those days, in the 90s, experience in wrestling counted against you with Kevin Dunn because he was trying to pull the wool over people's eyes every time that they hired somebody new. And they came in, Kevin Dunn or some of his minions in the studio would give the talk that this isn't wrestling and it's sports entertainment and we don't do wrestling, and lie to them. And the people with a wrestling background knew the difference and could see through that and knew that was just what, well, Kevin Dunn believed it, but that was just what Vince had people say. And the people who didn't have any wrestling background bought it because they didn't have any other frame of reference. So that's why they always picked, for better assignments, people with real television experience versus anybody that knew fuck all about wrestling. And yeah, so as far as announcers Vince particularly didn't like, was there anybody that was there for a week or two? Because that would, if he didn't particularly like anybody at all, they wouldn't be on the television to begin with.
You remember Stephanie Wyand?
Oh, good God, yes. And she was she with Todd Pettingill on one of those morning shows?
That's right. Well, on WWE TV. I don't know about anything outside of WWE.
No, one of the WWE morning show things that they tried on the weekends or whatever. I think that's what she was on, right? I don't know. Where did she come from? I worked there, and I'm asking you.
I have no idea.
Nobody else did either. There was a lot of people with no wrestling backgrounds. That was also, see, I got there right after the steroid business when they had put in the human resources department to be like a real company, and you had to talk to human resources about things, and they hired that Lisa Wolf, and they hired that Osbear D'Arce, and all these executives to work in the office that didn't come from wrestling backgrounds to prove that they were real companies, and they paid them a fortune, and they didn't do anything constructive, and they were usually a bother to everybody. And then after a couple of years, when the heat had died down, they all disappeared, thankfully.
Well, Jim, our final question...
Are we ready to disappear?
We have one last question here this week.
Well, I got one last answer.
This was sent to cornydrivethru@gmail.com from Gorilla Ventura in Montreal. And he says he's sorry about the mess. Thank you, Gorilla. I recently reread Ric Flair's autobiography and was surprised by a comment he made about Randy Savage. Flair seemed underwhelmed by Randy's match with Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 3 and stated of Savage, quote, "Because of his unwillingness to just get in the ring and improvise, I won't call him a great worker." I know Savage liked to plot things out, so I could see why Flair might not appreciate his approach, but saying Savage wasn't a great worker seems absurd to me. I always thought being a great worker meant making the match look real, and Savage's stuff always looked real to me, especially when compared to the rehearsed matches we see today. What do you make of what Flair wrote?
Where can I go first? There's a difference between your work being good and being a good worker. And I'm not gonna judge Rick's statement here just yet. I'm just gonna try to delineate differences in people in wrestling when they say certain things a certain way. If your work looks good, then it looks real. You can't see through it. But at the same time, it's safe. If you're a good worker, that can be not only physical but mental and psychological. Do you have good matches that bring the people on the fucking roller coaster ride? And
Jake.
yeah, and you know, he was a good worker, even though there was little in his matches, and he was the furthest thing from the best athlete, but mentally and psychologically, he was the good worker. So you understand there's different things. With Flair, talking about Savage, yes, Randy Savage was a good worker. His shit looked good, and the personality, he was real. We've talked about it many times. He was real, and his shit was good, and it wasn't dangerous or reckless or whatever. But at the same time, Randy Savage was never put in the position where he was going to go out and travel the world in a variety of promotions and have a 30-minute match for the world title every night against a different person, some of whom you might not have met, and there wasn't a lot of prep time. That's where Flair's going. He could step in the ring with anybody, whether he knew him or not, whether he'd ever met him or not, whether they even shook hands until they locked up in the ring, and he could go 30 minutes and it would be a world title match. It would be a main event. Savage in the WWF was at a different place where he was, you know, he's working with Hogan some, and that wasn't going to be 30 minutes or fucking hard-hitting or impromptu. But he also could work with the other guys like Steamboat, etc. when he wanted to. But where a lot of this comes from, maybe the majority of the ill feeling comes from, and it's hard to explain again today, but people have talked about it. Steamboat's talked about it. Savage knew that he and Steamboat had a chance to steal the show at WrestleMania 3, at least in terms of in the ring, even if they weren't going to have the big payoff like Andre and Hulk, even if they weren't going to be the main event, they could be what people remembered. And Savage sat down in his mind and worked out a match and wrote it down and gave it to Steamboat, and they studied it and quizzed themselves on it and went out and did it. And one of the reasons they did that was because how long did that match go? And it was long for WWF standards at that time, but was bell to bell, could it have been more than 15 minutes? Because nobody in those days got the chance, like in the NWA, like in Crockett, to go out and have a classic 30-minute world title match like Flair and Steamboat, whatever, you know, or Flair and Wyndham, or etc. So Savage knew that he might have been able to call that whole match off the top of his head in the ring, but it would have taken longer, because there would have had to have been times where you're down, you're in a headlock, you know, calling something or planning your next strategy. But if they knew it ahead of time, they could go boom, 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 and that's one of the reasons for the pace. Because I think Steamboat, when he did the interview, said they had some ridiculous amount of false finishes, like 40 or whatever, and they remembered them all, and it boom, boom, boom. But this is what I was saying, as far as people today may be, what in the world are you talking about? To write down your match ahead of time, to work it out in the locker room, and already know what you were going to do before you went to the ring, was probably not only a huge insult to anyone who considered themselves a great worker, but also just mind-blowing to any veteran of wrestling at the time that such a thing would take place. And I think that Flair wrote Savage off specific, because they had never been in the same place when that Steamboat Savage match happened. I doubt they'd ever met each other. They'd never been in the same promotion. He probably wrote him off right there, and not knowing his background, not knowing what else Savage had to offer, what else was going on, just thought this fucking guy wrote his match down and planned it ahead of time, and they went out and did it according to notes. Fuck that. And honestly, I can't, you know, blame that attitude at that time. That was just ridiculously unheard of. So that may have been what colored Flair's impression from then on of Randy Savage.
When did that start? I mean, he never did that with Lawler, did he?
No, that are you?
I know, that's what I'm saying. When, I
You
mean,
fucking kidding? When Lawler was the booker, I've been in matches where my heels were wrestling Lawler, and 10 minutes in the match, he was still trying to decide on what he wanted the finish to be. You couldn't get Lawler to fucking quit playing cards before his main event, where he'd sold out the Coliseum long enough to barely get the finish. And he said, "Oh, I'll figure it out." And they always did. Everything with Lawler was impromptu. No, that started there. Savage Steamboat 3, or WrestleMania 3, Savage Steamboat was, maybe some outlaw guys had done it somewhere. You know, every once in a while, when I'd done the finish for the Midnight Express, I had something jotted down on a fucking Wendy's receipt in my shorthand just to remind myself of what I'd thought of in the back seat. But I remember hearing at the time that guys were talking when that happened, saying, yeah, they planned that match out. And everybody's like, what? So I don't know that on a mainstream big level promotion that had ever happened before like that. Maybe, you know, if there was a situation where there was a celebrity or some pro football player or some big freak giant, somebody from outside the business, and they say, well, okay, this has got to be short and it's got to be exact and we can't let people see through this, then they had done something like that. But amongst two main event guys, I'd never heard of it before.
and of course that influenced Dallas Page from when he worked with Randy Savage. He started scripting out all of his matches, and that did not go over with, let's say, The Undertaker when he handed him a script.
Yeah, because you gotta, now it's Page coming from WCW to the WWF. It's not Randy Savage, for the previous 3 years, one of the top fucking guys in the company. It's a guy coming from the opposition and handing the icon of the new company a fucking, I don't even think they were, Page would have been bizarre enough to call it a script. That word was banned in wrestling until it was taken over by outsiders. You never heard anybody use the word script. But just the idea that he would hand him notes on, I came up with a match for us. Undertaker, what the fuck? Seriously? And I mean, even then in the 90s, you might go over it verbally if it's pay-per-view and your time is limited or big time TV or whatever. You go over it verbally, but to write it down and, etc., that was still very odd then. Now people, are like, well, why wouldn't you do that? Because it went against everything that the wrestling business was. So you had to get all the people out of the wrestling business that cared about what the wrestling business was before that could be a widespread procedure.
So, you're vaccinated, but someone you love isn't. It's time to show them how much you care. Tell them why they should get the shot. Take them to talk to a doctor. Take them yourself to get the vaccine before it's too late. If we all get just one person to get vaccinated, together, we'll put an end to the pandemic and save so many lives. Get tips on how to have the talk at kycovid19.ky.gov. That's kycovid19.ky.gov.
All right, Jim. Well, with that, let's get a few songs and get the hell out of here. This wild hair edition of this crappy show.
See, you warmed up to my name at the end of the show.
I had no choice. Jim, our first musical submission this week is from one of the most popular people that ever submit a song to the show. The man who controls the playlist with all the various musical submissions. Rocky the Ramone. Let's go to this one.
What is pro wrestling? Let me clarify this. Pro wrestling is an exhibition whereupon two men engage in simulated combat. Of course, we all know that the participants must be good enough to convince the spectators that both are struggling to win the match. That goes without even being said. Participants must also make an effort to conceal their cooperation towards a predetermined outcome. If the cooperation is too obvious, it becomes a gymnastics routine or a cheerleader competition.
Let me clarify this.
Let me clarify this. Thank you for playing my song.
It's a medley, a mashup.
I was listening to a podcast while driving on the road when my ears they heard a disturbing sound. The man was trying very hard to explain how modern wrestling just isn't the same. It's Jim Cornette's podcast with Brian Last, with his friend Brian Last. You'll catch on pretty fast. It's Jim Cornette's podcast, coming to you from Cornette's Castle. He reviews the shows and saves you the hassle. The listeners download the podcast in droves to hear Jim talk about these crappy shows. It's Jim Cornette's podcast with Brian Last, with his friend Brian Last. You'll catch on pretty fast. It's Jim Cornette's podcast. Learning about wrestling is fun. The lesson has just begun. Unless you listen to Meltzer, who thinks he's the only one. Now everything's cool, Tony let us all know. For booking advice, he listens to Jim's show. Now Meltzer's picking himself up off the floor, cause Tony can't listen to him no more. It's Jim Cornette. It's Jim Cornette's podcast. With Brian Last. With his friend Brian Last. It's Jim Cornette. Meltzer's out on his ass. Jim Cornette. It's Jim Cornette's podcast. Wow. Jim Cornette, wow. Jim Cornette, wow. Jim Cornette, wow. Jim Cornette, happy, happy Halloween, 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 happy, happy Halloween. What the hell? Let's try to. Happy, happy Halloween, 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 happy, happy Halloween. Let's try to.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Download the podcast for the Corny-thon. And don't forget the song submissions at the end. Don't miss it. And don't forget to submit your questions, even though Charlie from Starkville already sent in the same one.
Happy, happy Halloween, 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 happy, happy Halloween. Let's try to. Happy, happy
What a sound.
Halloween, happy, happy Halloween. Let's try to.
Stop it, please, for God's sake, please stop it. There's no more time. You've got to, please, stop it. Stop it now. Turn it off. Turn it off. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
Wow, well, there's the latest submission from Rocky the Ramone.
A Halloween special. He paid tribute to Zachary there. Got some Ghost of Mr. Chicken in at the start. Let me clarify this.
And just
thank you for having me.
And just a few quick notes, because Rocky put it in his note here. October 2nd is the 2-year anniversary of Rocky submitting songs to the Jim Cornette podcast. And the first one that was played on the show was October 28th, 2019. Of course, we really appreciate everything Rocky has done for the show. We look forward to more submissions in the future. Jim, let's get another song here. This, I don't know what this one is. This one, I don't know about. This one.
By the way, we don't listen to this shit ahead of time either.
A lot of Fozzy parodies coming in.
I thought Fozzy was a parody. If you parody a parody, does that turn it back serious?
This apparently is a commercial. Let's go to this. This was sent, I should say, who it's coming from. This was sent to cornydrivethrough@gmail.com from Jim Cornette at Castle Cornette. Hold on, let me see. There's even another name here. Just Seth. Here's something from Just Seth.
Cornette presents Web Designers of Genius.
Web designers of genius.
Today we salute you, Hotchkiss Featherbottom.
Mr. Hotchkiss Featherbottom.
They can't overload the site, he said. Give me your traffic, he said. But when it was all said and done, Cornette grabbed his tennis racket and chased Hotchkiss into traffic. He thought the stuff was good. Go, Daddy, go away. WordPress, don't press your fucking luck. Cornette will just do it himself now. He doesn't know HTML or Python at school. The only code Jim knows is Morse. Go to Codecademy now! So crack open a book on web design, Jim, because if you want something done right, don't hire Hotchkiss. Thank you, fuck you, bye. Jim Cornette, Castle Cornette, Louisville, Kentucky.
All right. Well, there's just
okay. And that was recorded not on the standard audio tape, but on actually Scotch Magic transparent tape, it sounded like.
Yeah, that was a very interesting one.
That used to be funny back when we still recorded things on tape.
Well, Jim, here's another song that was sent in. This was sent to cornydrivethru@gmail.com from Johnny Mosh. It is a stupid NXT name song. Let's hear this.
It's NXT, I can't believe my eyes. The Chirons got me wondering who's naming these guys. They need to fire whoever's putting them together. The turnaround is there's no believable names now. So annoyed every Tuesday night. I turn my TV on, then I turn it back off. How do they expect me to watch the show when every single wrestler's got a stupid fucking name? Name. Braun Breaker, Oney Lorcan, Ridge Holland. The names are lame. The stupid names. Electra Lopez, Von Wagner, Gigi Dolan, and JC Jane. The stupid names. They're stupid names.
Wow, well, there it is.
Well, there you go.
Johnny Mosh, very passionate about this issue.
Had a lot of forcefulness to it.
That's right, and let's get one last song and we're going to wrap things up. This song was sent to cornydrivethru@gmail.com from Brian S. He doesn't want his last name. Brian S. Here it is.
Brian S.
Engaged.
Sissy, but that Ashley Danielson shirt was pretty spiffy, yes it was. Cornette says it's the best you've done, slicker than cum. Oh, lovely wrestling, Stinging Punk and Henry on commentary, but you still use Marco Stunt a bunch, and that makes my anus itchy, yes it does. Get the preparation H and some rubber gloves. This ride's been rough. Fuck. Oh, Lily Wrestling. Oh, Lily Wrestling. Oh, Lily Wrestling. Sure, the marks think they're pretty smart, but they don't know the name because the rating system got fucked by indifference. The best friends are made fun of because they need their mom to drive them home. Wrestling will never ever be the same. Vinnie Mac's to blame. Hey there, Tony. You be good and just keep booking dreams. The little surprises makes it feel as important as Christmas is to a Jew. And that last line was for you. Let Jericho do whatever he wants to do. Hey there, Tony, here's to you. My balls are blue. So blue. Oh, Lily Wrestling. Oh, Lily Wrestling.
wrestling, oh, elite wrestling, oh, elite wrestling, oh, elite wrestling, elite wrestling, whoa, whoa,
Wow.
Wow.
Very good there. Brian S.
Good vocals, wonderful lyrics there, excellent musicianship, easy to dance to. I'd give that one a 94.
Well, on that 94, the drive-thru has closed. That's pretty good today.
Last call.
All right, we're ending on a happy note. Of course, you can hear the drive-thru when it debuts next week, wherever you find your favorite podcast, and the experience this weekend, also wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Yes, and we're going to be laughing at NXT, passing judgment on AEW, talking about the dark side of the ring this Thursday night on Vice, about Johnny K9 / Bruiser Bedlam, which will be enlightening for us all. And
hey, you're on that one. You're on that one too. Don't forget
I'm on that, so it's going to be a wonderful program. And also, right after that is the MLW Fightland special, and we're going to watch Fatu versus Hammerstone to get some non-WWE or AEW blood in here and see what they're doing. So that's going to be on this week's experience, along with the usual jocularity and joviality.
For that Hammerstone Fatu match, who is going to be more stoned in the ring? Here's the answer, Fatu! But anyway.
I don't think it would be possible for anyone else to
That's
be.
right. That's right. We'll talk more about that next week or later this week on The Experience. Of course, you can subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette for full episodes, clips of episodes, omnibus collections, all available for you to share and post wherever you want. Of course, the incredible archive of amazing Travis Cycle artwork. We've had some amazing guest artists sitting in for the last week plus. Check it all out today. Subscribe today. Over 250,000 strong and growing each and every day. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Get access to classic episodes of The Drive-Thru and The Experience on Patreon. Patreon.com/Cornette. For only $5 a month, you get access to the archive of The Drive-Thru and The Experience from the beginning in 2013. Patreon.com/Cornette. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Super Podcast at 605pod.com. Available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Don't forget about, or maybe soon forget about, Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com. I never know what to say for this plug.
Well, I tell you what, by the time you hear this, we may have suspended sales again, but only because of the outpouring, the plethora of folks that have purchased over the last few days, and I don't want to be a prick. I got to get that stuff out, but if it's still up, JimCornette.com will be up no matter what. But if the store is still open and things are still on sale and you want something and you hear my voice now, get it quick because it ain't going to stay too long. And then apparently, I'm going to have to farm Hotchkiss out to fix the problem, because since we've been recording, Facebook is off the air.
Well, you bring up since we've been recording, since that whistleblower was on 60 Minutes last night, Facebook has been off the air.
Well, I'm just saying, it says on the news here, it is normal for websites and apps to suffer outages. I can testify to that. The one on a global scale is very rare.
Well, we'll see what
Something's
you can do
going
about
on.
that. We'll see what you can do about that next week.
I'm gonna send Hotchkiss to go fix Facebook.
If any problems with your websites or anything else, don't forget the Drive-Thru is brought to you by the Law Office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until this weekend on The Experience, and next week right back here on the Drive-Thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the great Brian Last.
Well, it's Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru. Yes, it's Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru. Please shut up and listen while Corny is shooting. Yes, while Corny is shooting on pickpocket Putin and those outlaw macho fucks. Joey, Ryan, the young bucks, the rednecks and dumb fucks, and them dork order bum fucks. And then there's Jelly Janella and Santino Marella, the boogeyman, the boogeyman, the boogeyman. Corny's drive-thru, Corny's drive-thru, Corny's drive-thru. When it's all elite wrestling, Tony Khan is investing his millions of dollars in some dumb cosplay wrestlers. Yeah, they think they are wrestlers in video games just like Kenny Omega.
We pledge allegiance to the leader of the mighty cult of Cornette, and to the pro wrestling for which he stands. No blow-up dolls, kick spots, or dance routines, with blood, sellouts, and shoot angles for all.
Retracted. Ship dismissed.
And have you heard about Riho? She weighs 45 kilos and she's their champion. She's a Japanese schoolgirl. All the Japanese schoolgirls like Kenny Omega love to play with his Sega. Yeah, they play with his Sega. You need to sue the guy for you. Steven, Kiddo, everybody. Corny's drive-thru. Corny's drive-thru. Corny's drive-thru. Corny's drive-thru. And now, here are your hosts, Jim Cornette and the great Brian Last.
Warning. Dangerously low temperature detected.
So, you're vaccinated, but someone you love isn't. It's time to show them how much you care. Tell them why they should get the shot. Take them to talk to a doctor about it. Take them yourself to get the vaccine before it's too late. If we all get just one person to get vaccinated, together, we'll put an end to the pandemic and save so many lives. Get tips on how to have the talk at kycovid19.ky.gov. That's kycovid19.ky.gov. So, you're vaccinated, but someone you love isn't. It's time to show them how much you care. Tell them why they should get the shot. Take them to talk to a doctor about it. Take them yourself to get the vaccine before it's too late. If we all get just one person to get vaccinated, together, we'll put an end to the pandemic and save so many lives. Get tips on how to have the talk at kycovid19.ky.gov. That's kycovid19.ky.gov.
It's like I get it, and I'm just if it's a very short one, I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I don't want you to get getting more emotional than you are, but it.
Tell me stories. Tell me a story, Tony.
Story. Long time ago, back in the mountains of Virginia, this redneck kid. That's another story. Who loved Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. Anyway, All Elite Wrestling and the Owen Hart Foundation, a nonprofit charity which provides a vast range of assistance and opportunities to individuals in need across the world, are collaborating to honor the legacy of the late wrestler Owen Hart, a beloved figure in the pro wrestling community and beyond. This collaboration includes launching the annual Owen Hart Cup tournament within AEW, which will see the winner receive a cup known as the Owen, as well as the production and distribution of unique and original Owen Hart merchandise, including specified retail goods, as well as the upcoming AEW console video game. And that's why CM Punk and all of us are kind of emotional right now.
Mm-hmm.
If I can read between the lines here, I think it's because of what AEW thinks of the world of pro wrestling. Not only Owen Hart, but it kind of brings us all back down to earth. Am I saying that right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, deny us now. Like the company that got CM Punk to come back after 7 years, and now Thank you, Martha, Ode, and Athena. I think is that his daughter's name? I know Ode.
Athena, I think is right. That resonates.
If I'm wrong, I will correct myself at a later date. I apologize, but I think it is the wrestling player. It's crazy.
It is crazy. So, obviously, the biggest news we have had is CM Punk's return to wrestling that you touched on. When did you seriously start thinking about the
At some point when I was free and clear of all the Fugazi lawsuits that people filed against them, I think that there's a point where that stops and I'm free and clear and I'm like, sweet. And I think the healing can begin. And then it kind of coincided with the rise of AEW and stuff like that. So it's at that point, it was probably a matter of time, but I don't know if there was like one aha moment that made me go, yeah, that's the place. But I've already said, like, the Brody tribute show and the way Brody stuff was handled was just so classy and not what I'm used to.
Yeah.
So it made me raise an eyebrow and go, interesting.
You mentioned in previous interviews that multiple people have heard it. Every 6 months, a guy comes in with money saying, hey, I'm starting a wrestling company. We've got TV, blah, 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 blah. And everyone's kind of skeptical of it. I think a lot of people kind of saw the same thing happening early on, especially those who had maybe been burned by it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Had you been watching AEW since the beginning? Or was there sort of a, like, oh, this could be a thing I'm hearing?
I mean, I would miss shows here and there because I wouldn't, be busy doing other stuff. But I recorded it on the DVR, and if I was home on a Wednesday, I would watch it. And then definitely, social media really kind of helps you keep informed with the goings on of things. So I would for sure keep up with it that way. I watch it religiously now.
I've been involved in many things, as you know. I never have been involved in a sellout of an arena record time based on a rumor. That's what we got at the United Center for Rampage. And I remember we were in Charlotte. Tony Khan said to me, he said, I want you to go out and I want you to announce the first dance coming to Chicago for Rampage. Just me. He said, yeah, just you. And on the stage too. I remember thinking, you'll pay for that. To announce Chicago and Charlotte, I just wonder how it's going to be received. But I announced it, and then the pop came, and then the chant of CM Punk came, and I'm thinking, oh boy, it's going to be fucking big. And it was. Talk about your reaction to the pop when you walked out.
I knew we were on the right track, it was designed to be the worst kept secret. You know what I mean? Because in a business where everybody likes a surprise, but also knowing that a lot of the times secrets can't be kept. Going back to the Brody thing, secrets were kept. But also knowing that this is a business and we do need to get some revenue going here. So thought process is, no, well, we need to announce it because we need to sell tickets. You'd be stupid to not announce it.
Right.
I feel like we got the best of both worlds. I feel like it was maybe leaked or somebody found out, but there was still a giant question mark or a cloud of mystery over it because it was, there's talk. He signed, but maybe he did, I read a report that I had signed. I never signed my contract until I was in the United Center, like maybe 90 or 30 minutes before I walked out. The extras are always around. But it was either South or North Carolina, I can't remember. And I was in a hotel, and I was just laying on the bed with Larry and my wife, and I was watching the show, and I literally stood up. I got sweaty, and I got cold and hot at the same time, and I was like, oh, all right, we have to do this now. You know what I mean? Like, props to Tony Khan, because I don't know anybody else who would do handshake deals like that. I wasn't signed, and he went out there and had you announce United Center. If I was one of those carny fuckers. I would have called up the other time, like that night, but like, hey, brother, you know, what can you give me to not go? You know, like, but that was never. Tony trusted me to not be that guy.
Yeah.
And I'm not that guy. You know, I think that's a beautiful part of the relationship. But man, I got hot flashes, cold sweats. Pits were sweating. I was like ready to go to bed, and I was like, I gotta go work out. Like I gotta go do something with this energy. Like I'm like freaking out, you know. That was my night, like during that announcement. And then I thought the little Darby promo afterwards. I was like, man, you really hit it out of the park. You did real good with that. Yeah. So it was fun. Be able to like sit in a hotel room and watch the television show and watch it all happen. I was like, it was exciting.
United Center, everything's quiet, the lights, word chanting, and then cult of personality. And I had a running bet with my husband, whether it was going to be cult of personality or kill switch engage.
Oh, wow. Did you lose or did you win?
I lost. I was hoping there was going to be maybe a callback. Like, no one lost. Let's just be real here. Everyone is very happy with cult of personality, but I'm curious, like, why the choice of cult of personality? How did it feel hearing that music again?
I have been fortunate enough to be friends with a lot of great bands, a lot of talented artists, and to use a lot of those songs for entrance music. Cult of Personality, I think, transcends everything. And I'm proud of it. The name CM Punk is forever tied to the band Living Colour and Cult of Personality. It's just been a common thread throughout my entire life. Like, the whole reason I used that song in Ring of Honor is because I love that song. I thought it was great entrance music. And for the character and everything, I mean, that was the song my Little League team would play, like, after we won games in 1989, you know? So, like, it's been with me for a while. I know all those guys. I was just with them at Riot Fest. Riot Fest sucks, by the way. There's going to be some litigation now that I was on the grounds during the festival, but I'll handle that now. I got Tony Khan lawyers now, so we're fine.
Oh yeah, you're set.
I just think that song's too big to not use. I mean, respect to Killswitch Engage too. Like, I dumb lucked into that song when I was in the WWE too. Like, I've been fortunate in that regard.
We've had many fan questions that we usually get to at the end, but we're going to touch on a couple now because we want to talk about your first match back against Darby at All Out. Corey Adams wants to know, what was your preparation, if any, for the match, for being all out in the ring for so long? Either get back in the ring shape or knock some of the rust off? And if so, who helped you knock that rust off, if anybody?
So getting in a ring and taking bumps doesn't sound like the greatest idea when you got a bump card. I mean, it's damn near 3/4 of the way filled up already, so.
Absolutely.
But I don't think there's anything quite like in-ring cardio. You know, guys who are in ring shape are in great cardiovascular shape. Luckily for me, I also dabbled in some mixed martial arts, and if there's anything that is on par with being in ring shape to be a pro wrestler, it's doing MMA. I mean, even just hitting pads, sparring, jiu-jitsu, all that stuff. I mean, it's all very, very similar. Your heart rate is peaked for an extended amount of time. So I just did a whole bunch of that, and it works. You know what I mean? If you can breathe while somebody's, like a 300-pound man is on top of you trying to choke you, you can breathe running the ropes. You should be okay.
What did you think about the match after it was done?
I haven't watched it. I might be the guy that doesn't ever watch his stuff anymore. I know I used to. I used to be that guy that watches his stuff. If I watch that match back with Darby, I know I'm going to find things that I will pick at. I don't want to pick at myself. I was super stoked leaving that ring. I thought it couldn't have been any better. And I don't want to come up with like a tiny little, I don't want to go, oh, I look fat in my gear. That part of me, I left with the CM Punk from 7 years ago. I'm just going to really enjoy. Like, I know when stuff sucks and I know when stuff's good. And that was good. I thought it couldn't have been any better. I thought it was great. First match back after 7 years.
Yeah.
I wanted it to look like I didn't miss a beat because I have an ego, but I also needed it to look like this shit's hard. And I think I accomplished that because I think in the media scrum after that night, the one guy was like, oh, you got blown up.
Yeah.
It needs to appear that way, doesn't it? Like, it can't be easy. I can't walk in here and just be like, this is too easy, you know? Like, it's a fight, and it needs to look that way.
Being blown up is all a part of being in a fight, right?
Absolutely. Fatigue makes cowards of us all.
Damn. Heard that somewhere. Wade Illestein's monster, speaking of all that, wants to know, how awesome did it feel saying, it's clobbering time after all these years?
So awesome. I think it's such a silly part of my entrance.
Right.
I used to do little stuff like that all the time. For people who don't know, obviously it's, you know, the Thing from the Fantastic Four would say it's clobbering time before he got in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a seminal New York hardcore band called Sick of It All that has a song called It's Clobbering Time. So really, we're all just Jack Kirby, Stan Lee fans. I'm a Stan Lane fan and a Stan Lee fan.
Ooh, there you go.
But, you know, Marvel comic fans, comic book nerds, love hardcore music. So it was like a marriage of two things that I love that has now become a marriage of three things I love. It's like comic books, New York hardcore, and pro wrestling.
One of the things I'm particularly excited about as someone who hasn't been in the business for very long is bringing in people who are veterans and considered some of the greatest and being able to learn from, you know, their history and their mindsets and being able to grow and whatnot. And one of the things that you've said is coming in and working with the younger talent. So obviously starting with Darby, but I think you had called out Will Hobbs back in February of this year as well. By the time we're filming this, it's before your match with Hobbs happens. But why Hobbs next?
We'll peel back the curtain a little bit here, which it is what it is. I think I need to show a varied, just different looks, right? Like, I didn't dream in my wildest imagination I could be this big of a babyface, so to speak, right? Like, but it's pretty crazy, and I think we need to ride the wave. And I never liked baby matches. I always felt like somebody needs to be the heel a little bit, and I don't have any of that with Will Hobbs. I got a guy that is gonna knock my dick in the dirt, and I'm gonna get the sell.
Yep.
I just hope there's some kids in the back watching that go, "Oh wow, it's cool to sell," you know, because I just think of Ricky Steamboat.
Yeah.
You know, one of the best sellers of all time, and just the way it was an art, and really trying to make some simplistic stuff and get the most out of very little. And I've been impressed with Will Hobbs, you know, the way he moves, and I think anybody who can see that he has potential, you know.
How about that table bump?
Sucked.
The table didn't break. What the hell?
Glad it didn't break, because I feel like that made it look better, but yeah, it made it feel worse. So.
Sure did. Just a little inside story. My daughter, who I know you met backstage and absolutely adores CM Punk, as soon as the table was back and we came back from a commercial break, she sent me a text during the show. And I've told my kids, please don't text me during the show. She said, is he okay? That really looked bad. I said, sweetie, I don't know. He's in the back. I don't know right now, but it did look like it hurt.
It was stiff.
Yeah, it was stiff. Yeah. All right, we're talking with CM Punk. And coming up, we'll talk about
You don't have to leave the house. So folks, if you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to Keeps, Keeps, Keeps.com/JCE to receive your first month of treatment for free. That's Keeps.com/JCE to get your first month's treatment for free. Don't lose your hair, Brian. You're a good-looking man.
Oh, yeah.
To inspire tomorrow's brightest minds, educators need today's best tools. Introducing Verizon Innovative Learning HQ, the next-gen online portal that helps educators inspire curiosity. Through free access to immersive educational experiences and standards-based lessons and training, educators can integrate the latest technology into the classroom and bring out the best in their students. It's all part of our commitment to help close the digital divide and leave no educator behind. Register today at verizon.com/learning.
James E. Corny to you and me. James E. Stephen P. Newsies consigliere. A Q&A podcast with co-host Brian Lass. Tell that guy take off the stupid fucking mask. Keep all your outlaw machos in your shithole bars. Keep all your cosplay wrestlers too. James E. The fans think you're so mean. And when they ask you why, say thank you, fuck you, bye. Keep your jazz hands off my TV screen. He's had enough of Marco Stunt, the Bucks, and Omega. Run a bunch of fools. Try your wrist lock, hip toss, cut out all your flipping, flopping. For fuck's sake, all of you tag teams, learn the fucking rules. James E. James E.
Hello again, friends, and today, here on the Jim Cornette Experience, we're going to have a teetotal blast because we're going to talk about NXT, MLW, AEW, the dark side of Bruiser Bedlam, and the repugnantly rotten Rhodes reality wretchedness. All that for you right here today, friends. And you are our friends. And joining me, Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you, the man who doesn't want friends unless they're tax deductible, the great Brian Last, everybody.
Aloha, Jim. I would say it's a pleasure to be here, but I really don't know. You're stealing my lines now? You're stealing my entire open?
Yes, because I wanted to make sure that everybody out there knows that they are my friends. So when I go off on everybody in this program today, they'll not take it personally. I'm not mad at the listeners. But boy, howdy, have we watched some wretched rottenness lately. The repeated repugnance of some of this programming. Holy mackerel. And I've had a rough week. I'm all right now, but last week I was in rough shape. You know, I tell you, don't buy a Ford Focus.
I wasn't intending on buying a Ford
Don't
Focus.
do it now, whether you were going to or not. Listen to me. Do not buy a Ford Focus out there in podcast land. It'll give you nothing but grief and tragedy. And I'll tell you why. Because many years ago, I have now had Black Beauty, my Ford Expedition, the big SUV. I've had that since 2007. And because of the last 2 years, when I just, stopped driving anywhere, I have still not gotten to the mileage marker, the milestone that I said I was gonna go ahead and then get rid of Black Beauty and get a brand new one with all the bells and whistles. It's the last vehicle I'll ever buy in my lifetime. But I haven't got to that milestone yet. And plus, I haven't wanted to go out in public and go through the falderall of purchasing the new car when I don't need the old one almost at all anyway. Here to the post office and back, right? But I've got almost 300,000, 297 and change, almost 300,000 miles. So I figure I'm going to wait, and when I get to 300,000, and I'll make that change. But it's going to be at the rate I've been going another couple of years, because I'm doing like fucking 40 miles a month, right? But not even 10 years ago, Stacy, for was it her birthday or our anniversary? Golly, that year, one or the other. she wanted this Ford Focus. It is a nice little car. And boy, they're zippy. And we had problems with it because she had wanted a certain kind of paint. And when we tried to order that, it was like a black sparkly kind of paint. The tsunami they had over somewhere, wherever it is they have the tsunamis about 10 years ago, had destroyed the factory that made that paint. They were all backed up, so she had to get regular black. But we got the Ford Focus. And there is not 50,000 miles on this vehicle. I got 300,000 on mine, right? The only problem I ever had is the fuel pump went out one time about 6 years ago. That's it. But this thing doesn't have hardly 50,000 miles on it, if that. And there's been 18 recall letters that we've gotten for this and that thing. And, you know, it's like, you know, if you're driving down the road, if your front tire falls off, you may have an issue. That kind of shit. We're like, what the fuck? And constantly we had to take it back to the dealership, and they say, oh, no, we fixed that, or no, that's not in this batch of things, or no, this, blah, 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 whatever the fuck. They're very accommodating over there, because it's not their fault that their head honchos in Detroit apparently made a rotten car. But anyway, so what was it, yesterday or the day before? I can't even remember now. But I'm minding my own business here at home. That's the way these stories usually start. In the afternoon, Stacy's gone to a doctor's appointment. On the way back, she's going to stop by and bring us some dinner. So it's getting almost rush hour time, and the phone rings. It's her, and she's checking on the dinner order. Well, how sweet of her. Hello? Help! The car's broke down! I'm on the interstate! I'm in a bad spot! Ha! I'm like, oh, one of us needs some relief. Now, I had to get the Jerry Clower in anyway. But I said, oh, shit. I said, where are you? She's literally, and people misuse that phrase, but in this case, it's accurate. She's literally 2 miles from the house. She is in front of the exit that she would get off to come to our house off the highway here. But she is in a bad spot because she's past the previous exit, and there's road construction been going on for months at this area of the highway, and it's one of the worst at rush hour. It's one of the gloomiest places in town, and she's sitting on the on-ramp where the exit that she had just passed is getting on. You see what I'm saying? She got over as quick as she could, and people would let her with the blinkers on, and they say, oh, she's trying to pull something. We gotta cut her off.
Low gravity warning.
So she has to get all the way over, and she's on the on-ramp, right at the end of it, right before the road construction sign, next to the guardrail with a drop-off, and people passing by on the left-hand side. So anyway, I'll be right there. Call AAA. We got the AAA Platinum Diamond thing. They'll tow your car anywhere. If you want them to, they'll put it on a flatbed truck and drive it down to the ocean and fucking dunk the goddamn thing in, which is what I requested. But anyway, so she's on the phone to AAA. I'm driving over there. So I've got to go farther than she is actually to get around to come back. You see what I'm saying? And I pull up behind her in Black Beauty, where at least I figure, all right, these fucking idiots pouring off this exit and speeding by and trying to cut each other off. At least I'll provide some type of blockage before they hit her smaller vehicle. And we had to sit there for 45 minutes and wait on the AAA truck. And I said, what happened? She was driving down the road, minding her own business at 60 miles an hour, and suddenly a bunch of lights came on and it just quit. And she got over to the side of the road. I said, it sounds like the fuel pump. I said, you've got gas, right? Yes, I've got gas. I was going to stop and get gas 1 mile down the road at the gas station when I got off the exit to come to our house, but it says I've got 20-something miles, and it's not 20 miles from here to the house. Okay. It's got to be the fuel pump. And the truck gets here finally. And he backs up, and now these people are trying to go around and all this shit. And he jacks this thing up and loads the car onto the truck. And I said, just in case, because wasn't one of those recalls something about the fucking gas tank? And she, as a matter of fact, she reminded me of that. One of the recalls is about the gas tank or something. We've had all this shit checked out, nevertheless. I tell the guy with the truck, I said, before you do anything else, haul it down to the next exit, get off, we're gonna go to that gas station, and we're gonna try to put some gas in this thing and see if it'll start. Because it wouldn't start on the side of the road. All right, so we finally get out of there, out of the danger that we were in, our life and limb taken into our hands. We get to the gas station, he pulls up with, it's a fucking flatbed truck with the car on it, right? It's not even being towed, it's just up on it. He pulls up on the gas pump and everything. And we have to reach up and put fucking 5 gallons of gas in it. Guess what happened, Brian?
What happened?
That thing started right up, fresh as a daisy. And sure enough, apparently, even though I had only put because I didn't want to sit there and fill the whole goddamn tank up if the car was dead, and also, you know, I'm standing there, it's on the truck, right? I just put 5 gallons in, but all of a sudden then it registered, oh yeah, you could go 100 and something miles on this. So apparently, we now find out that one of the recalls, they said, well, just don't let the gas get too low in the tank, or you might have an issue. Because it'll tell you you've got gas when you don't have gas. Now, isn't the gas gauge one of the most important functions of the gas gauge? Not to tell you when you've got gas, but when you don't have any fucking gas? So it's just gonna tell you all the time you've got gas, regardless whether you got gas or not. You know what that gave me? Gas! So that was a 2-hour journey in the midst of rush hour traffic to risk our lives.